Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. It is Monday. It is February the 16th. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for those of you who are joining us live and you're catching it just a few minutes late. Yeah, it's like 10 minutes late. There's things that are way outside of my control. And one of the things that's really important that I do is grab video clips because I like to bring you evidence. I don't like to just say my opinions long form. Sometimes there's more to it and there's things that are happening and other people are saying things. If we want to share that information, then I have to be able to access them. And today I could not. So no matter what I do for doing redundancy or for having fail safes, we have two different internet lines that run to this house. Sometimes websites just don't work. And some of those are the places where I gather clips. So be it. We're a few minutes late. Maybe the internet in Texas was taking a President's Day break. I don't know. All right. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the silver alert, the most important silver alert that's happening. And I don't mean the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping story. All of that actually looks really bad from my end. It's gone on over 2 weeks now. So that's not a great situation. It's probably not good for her either. Luckily, the FBI was able to find a glove and it was 2 miles from the house. And it looks like the glove that may have been used by someone who touched the Ring camera or the Nest cameras that they were able to access. So that's the update. There's DNA, which may or may not be from the person because there's only a few types of gloves. So that's the silver alert that everybody is focusing on. But what I want to kind of point out is how the American political elite have looked at you, the American taxpayer, the person that is funding the ridiculous monstrosity that is the American government. And they have basically decided that you are an Alzheimer's patient. Or even worse, you're a goldfish living in a bowl sitting on a map of the United States on the desk of an Alzheimer's patient's room. You completely have no ability to process and hold on to thoughts for more than a few seconds. And that's the way that we're being treated. That's the reason that we're having this catastrophe and PR rollout of the Epstein files. And it just seems overwhelming to me that the administration, which we got some word over the weekend that the Donald Trump has been fuming around the White House and he's mad that people are referring to his team as the Epstein administration. This administration doesn't understand what they're doing. And we actually thought we were getting PR savvy people that were going to cut through some of the narrative bullshit and really just give people what they asked for. You know, like you made a promise and then you go and you carry out the promise. And what we're seeing is business as usual, that the same sort of instinct to manipulate the public and hope that if they just throw BS and they'll just get blind cheerleading and they'll get blind hate from the other side. And so they can play the hate off each other. They can play the cheerleaders off each other and nobody's going to end up getting anywhere. And in the meantime, a generational opportunity and a generational moment to turn America around is really stolen from all of us. We don't have it. And it's not our fault. I think that the mandate was there. I think that the independent voters came together and everybody said, I'm willing to do the thing that people have always done, compromise, jump into political bed with people that I wouldn't otherwise necessarily think are the greatest options. And at the same time, they took us for a ride. I think that's the frustration that's going on right now. And no amount of messaging can change that. And Americans do not actually have that goldfish. This is not the average American voter. There's a picture of a goldfish I found. They're kind of weird looking animals, aren't they? Anyway, so that's what I want to talk about. And I'm really frustrated with it because I'm not the only one who thinks this way. There are millions of people that are starting to turn against it. The approval ratings and more importantly, the favorability ratings of independent voters, the people that are gettable voters, it's way down and it's going to continue to go down. Because if you treat people like a goldfish and you just give them garbage flakes at the top, they're not going to behave the way that you want eventually. I don't think Americans actually are goldfish. Okay, before we get into all that stuff, let's talk about my friends over at My Patriot Supply. For those of you that are paying attention and you understand that there can be some really bad things that could happen, maybe government is not the solution to most of your problems. You're recognizing in that moment that maybe you should do something about it. Maybe you should invest in a solution, in an insurance policy for yourself. Last month, a lot of the country got hit with some of the worst storms that they'd seen in decades. If nothing else, it was just unpreparedness. We even saw places like New York City completely fall down on the job, squash people into their houses, squash people into their cars, froze over the snow banks, all this kind of stuff. Thousands of people lost power, some people for a few hours, other for a lot longer. Blackouts are a normal thing. And one of the things that we do as another redundancy, in addition to the internet lines here, is that I actually have a Grid Doctor 3300 solar generator, which is our full-time UPS or universal power supply. It's not a gas generator. It's silent. It's safe to use indoors. It's completely off-grid. It sits just outside this room here. Everything that you see in my studio is actually powered by our Grid Doctor 3300, which runs on the grid. But I also have solar panels that are sitting right next to me. And if I needed to run them outside the window, we could do that. They've got something like 100 feet of cable to make that happen. Guys, if you go to Prepare Like Kyle right now, preparelikekyle.com. Actually, I've got the wrong website up, so I will fix that for you guys. Preparelikekyle.com is going to get you the huge pack of things they have. They're calling it the Mount Rushmore of preparedness. It's going to be $800 in free preparedness gifts, along with a 4-week survival food kit, water filtration, cook stove, and the Grid Doctor. Pretty much everything in there is stuff that we have in this house, and I think it's a great idea to make sure that you're hedging against God knows what coming your way. Preparelikekyle.com. Again, I'll fix the website. Sorry about that. If you guys want to scan the QR link that you see on the screen right now, that will get you there. Preparelikekyle.com. You know, the best time to prepare for some of these things is when the weather is actually not crazy and the trucks can get to you. And that way, if things get crazy and you're snowed in, you're not going to be stuck dying in your house. All right, that's what we're gonna get going right now, starting on this kind of weird Monday morning. Everything's a little bit off kilter, but I think we're gonna bring it into some clarity. Here we go. They changed the website on me. You guys catch that? Sometimes they do that. I looked at it over the weekend and it completely skipped my mind. All right, I want to get going with something that many of you may not know. Do you know this? As of mid-February 2026, U.S. forces have seized at least 7 oil tankers. Do you remember us covering one of them? Right? I read about another one this morning, and I heard George Hill say that others had been grabbed as well. And I went like, well, how the hell many oil tankers is the United States grabbing? Are we supposed to even pay attention to this? The story goes as this. This is an AI generation, a summary from multiple things from the Epstein, aka Trump administration. They're enforcing a maritime blockade against the Venezuelan oil exports. The last one that was just seized was in the Indian Ocean, and it left from Venezuela the same day or night, somewhere around then, when Maduro was being grabbed. And apparently we're not supposed to pay attention to that. There's all kinds of things that are the opportunity cost when we focus in on the stories like Nancy Guthrie, which seems really salacious and it's super exciting, but at the end of the day, it might be the most famous silver alert that's ever happened in the U.S. I'm fascinated. I think our chat is as well, that we've got a bunch of people fixated on an 84-year-old woman who requires daily medication for her heart that was grabbed 15 days ago without the daily medication for her heart. And now we're getting updates from our FBI, which is not arresting deep state villains, which is not bringing justice for the people that we thought were problematic, which is screwing up the rollout of the Epstein files. And so the front page that I saw on a number of websites is talking about this DNA update. And I don't know why this is the thing that they've decided to roll on. But it is. It is a thing that is being sold as the most important, the news sort of like sponge that's grabbing certainly a lot of people on the political right. The odds of this woman being alive at this point seem lower and lower every single day. And who knows what the story is or why. But it is distracting people. This is Holly Silverman, their deputy weekend editor. A deputy editor? That's kind of a funny thing to say. Federal investigators have said that they received preliminary DNA results from a glove that was recovered near the Tucson area home of 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie. Again, I cannot hone in enough on the 84-year-old part. That doesn't mean that there are not people in this audience that are close to that age or even over that age, maybe. But in America, that means you're at life expectancy. I'm not trying to be callous. I had this sort of nasty thought. At some point in time, we all sort of outlive the biological imperative for which we're there. And that's not to say that we don't love grandparents and that I don't love my parents. I do. But like the reality of all of our time on Earth, if you just kind of zoom out and you take it in a non-emotional way, we exist. We're born on this planet. We grow up biologically, right? And our only purpose is to basically procreate, the biological end of it, the DNA. We are meant to procreate, put another generation of human beings out there. We all have that biological imperative, whether or not we achieve it or not. It's another animal. And then once those people that we've created are launched and they're on their own, and that might be 18 years old, or that might be 25 years old. Every generation kind of, gets to its physical capabilities at a different time. Then that's it. Like when it comes to what we needed to accomplish. I remember having a really poignant conversation with my father. I think we were in Spain. It was probably the last family vacation that me and my siblings all went on together. It was really kind of a weird moment. There's a lot of emotion on that trip too. And I remember him saying something to me that his dad wasn't around to see him grow up, which I know was true. And that was his guiding mandate in life, that he wanted to achieve fatherhood and being alive long enough to raise his children. And I think at that point, maybe my youngest siblings were like 16 or 17 years old, something like that. And so he did it. I mean, he accomplished the thing that he needed to accomplish. And then I think everything after that becomes kind of gravy. We have a woman who's 84 years old, and I'm sure she's a wonderful lady. And I'm sure that her kids, who are all like older than I am, really love her. But this is not national news. And for the FBI to go out there and spend all this sort of this political bandwidth, forget whether or not that's actual capabilities of the FBI. Although I'm confident, having seen the number of people that are being deployed on these searches and the amount of distraction that the director is using, it's really bizarre. They found a glove 2 miles away from the residence. There's a few things that this story tells us about our current state of federal law enforcement. The FBI apparently, according to them, they found a glove 2 miles away from the residence and, quote unquote, appeared to match those worn by a masked man seen on the doorbell video, which we don't even know was the person that took her. And this is what they're spending their bandwidth on. What they're doing is everything they can to take away from the stuff that's actually going on and the things that may actually matter. Like the Trump administration grabbing oil tankers to the tune of 7, each of them having millions of barrels of oil. Look at the key details here. This is summarized from a number of different articles. The United States has taken oil from the tankers for processing in U.S. refineries, with reports indicating 50 million barrels of oil were taken as of late January 2026. There's 7 oil tankers that we've taken possession of, like pirates. What a weird thing. Like, what a weird thing for us not to be talking about. Has that been something that the United States government has been involved in? And by the way, there's a law enforcement component, as we were told over and over again. Your tax dollars are paying for American federal troops to go and seize oil from a sovereign nation that we grabbed the quote unquote dictator or leader of. Whether he was a good guy or a bad guy is kind of irrelevant to me. We're doing open seas piracy. And then what's the payoff? Like, where do we see that? Oh, we see it in the context of they're going to spend all their time telling you that they've doubled the reward. There's now $100,000 for a missing 84-year-old woman. Absolutely bizarre. NPR covered the same story. Want to run to that too? They're talking about DNA. They're talking about how there's this disagreement between federal and local law enforcement in the Pima County Sheriff's Office, that they don't have a good relationship. We covered this on Friday. Shocker. When the FBI, which comes in big dogs a lot of these agencies, when the FBI, which has less experience in kidnappings and probably has far less experience in dealing with homicides than the sheriff's department that they're dealing with, a local sheriff's office, but they've come in and they're looking for the PR win. How badly do you think these meetings are going with the current FBI director, who's looking for a big PR win to be able to say, we found her, we did this, we did whatever? So what you're seeing in this this picture here from NPR, which is kind of interesting, it came out of the Associated Press, is an FBI agent doing some swab, and you're seeing some sheriff's deputies standing around. They're all wearing gloves. Apparently, when people are done with the gloves on the scenes that they're on, they're just discarding them, like into the desert, because they found a bunch of other gloves, per these stories, all over the place. That's the distraction that's being sold to us. And in the meantime, they cannot spin the economy, the job numbers, the inflation, the successes of the administration fast enough and hard enough to actually convince real people. And so what they did is they gave them true crime, which is what people wanted. That's the reason this story is interesting to me, is how many people immediately were like, you know what? We've got all the great parts of drama. We've got the feds versus the locals going. This is something that many of you found out was regular in Die Hard, going back into the 80s. It's been going on for a very long time. When somebody comes in and big dogs you. By the way, I had a girl in my academy class who was exactly the kind of FBI agent that everybody kind of hopes doesn't exist. She was a 3-year Army veteran. She spoke mediocre, kind of broken Russian and told everyone she was fluent in Russian until like the guy who actually spoke fluent Russian next to me said she wasn't. She did every job under the sun. Anybody who's been in the military kind of knows these people. When you meet them and you're like, wait, 3 years and you had 1,100 jobs? You've done everything from teach CQB to interrogate, terrorist subjects to being an underwater demolition specialist. And you're like, that's not real. That person. Anyway, she got sent to a rural office in the FBI and showed up there. And in the rural office that she was working in, she was doing counterterrorism. And she immediately went to go big dog some people at it was like a dinner party of some friends and people that were in local law enforcement. So you had some sheriff's deputies, you had some local PD guys, the people that do the real work of law enforcement in this country. And she showed up and she told all of them, none of you guys really matter. I have a real job in national security doing the most important part of law enforcement. And that attitude, that's what you're seeing Fox News capitalize on. The cockiness of the federal government and that self-important, self-righteous sort of attitude versus like people every day. Like, does anyone hear about the Pima County Sheriff's Office on a daily basis? Nah, never. So we're seeing that fun and that drama. Oh, it's so exciting. It's enough to distract us. And a missing woman. It's a mystery. And you guys get to participate in it. It's the same thing that I heard Tucker Carlson talk about in a sort of edited clip where he was talking about the fascination people had with the Charlie Kirk murder, the assassination. Any of these stories that blow up and are disproportionately large, everybody thinks that they're a part of the investigation now. I saw TikToks about it where people were like, they all have their own theories. Nobody has any of the actual information in the case. Nobody has access to the actual evidence. And what you're finding out is there's sloppiness. There's people wandering around in the desert, like doing photo ops. They're apparently flicking their gloves off when they're done on the scene. And then they're looking through them and they're wasting all their time. So now we have a glove that looks like it might belong to the right guy and they've sent it off to a lab. And that is a multi-website, large display headline. And there's almost nothing like at the end of the day. And then what? They find a woman and she's 84 and she's in bad health and maybe she makes it and maybe she doesn't. And it's a local news story and it's super important to that family and has no bearing on you. Like so many other things that have no bearing on you. Like when the federal government shuts down. I found a clip earlier today and I'm not even going to bother you with it because it was clearly a senator looking for more time. This is Senator Britt from Alabama, who did that weird little response to the State of the Union under Biden, where she was sitting in her front, whatever, kitchen. And she said that we were about to pull the paychecks from TSA. DHS has begun a partial shutdown because funding has expired, because now they have politicized the funding of TSA. The people that we all pay to grope you and have found zero terrorists and had something like a 95% failure rate when it came to doing red team analysis and red team tests. Do you guys realize that every time that you go and you fly? We had a senator crying about whether or not we were going to pay TSA agents and officers that hang out there and tickle you before you go and you jump on a plane. This is the same group that got a big bonus for missing paychecks for a few days. because DHS is being wildly irresponsible with our money, which is the real story, that we have all these dollars. And how about the fact that TSA is not even normal for most of our lifetimes? For more than half of my life, there was no TSA. It didn't exist, and certainly not in the current iteration. They used to run tests, these red cell tests, of seeing whether or not they could get a weapon system through. They'd break into component parts, and they would put them in different bags, and then they would run them through the scanners and the metal detectors, and they would see what happened. And then we would find out that like 95% of the weapon systems, they're dummy weapon systems, dummy bombs, dummy guns, whatever, dummy weapon, blade edge weapons and stuff. They'd all make it through, like 95% in the red cell. So their solution was the classic government solution. As usual, when there's a government problem, they were like, well, the issue is actually not the fact that we don't fulfill the mission of the government. The issue is that you know about it. Take a minute to think about that. It's a national holiday, so the federal government's off work. They can all listen to the program today. The issue of finding out that we have inefficiencies in our government is that you know about it. And it's always the case. It doesn't matter whether it's TSA red cell testing or whether it's the economy and jobs numbers or whether or not it's crime statistics. Under the Biden administration, the guy who is now sitting as the director of the FBI would have very quickly called out Chris Wray, would have called out Merrick Garland if they were touting crime numbers going down. And they would say, listen, it's not so much that the crime numbers are going down. It's that the people that have been reporting the crimes are incentivized to not report them. And so their solution is not to fix their policies or recruit more police officers, particularly male police officers that can kick ass, which is the right answer. We saw some lady police officers and some lady, actually, we have one on the screen. Don't we have one right here on this NPR story? Hold on, let's go back. Yeah, you got a female sheriff's deputy sitting here on this screen right here, overseeing the search. And then you've got this beast-looking guy standing next to her. He's got 8 inches on her. He's got 60 pounds of muscle on her. And they have the same paycheck, most likely, even if there's a difference in, maybe a seniority difference. Rather than fix the problem, it's just way better if we just stop reporting how bad things are. Which is why I've been so amused that the Epstein administration, which is what I'm calling the Trump administration, just because it's funny. The Epstein administration has decided to do a couple of things, and you can see where the messaging is. Are we talking about seizing oil tankers? No, they got a bunch of backlash on that. People went like, are we freaking pirates? Is this really what we're doing? We're not going to report on that. Okay, got it. What else can we cover with? 84-year-old old lady. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about the Dow. Are we going to talk about the ridiculous sort of rollout of the Epstein files? Are we going to talk about all the people that are involved in that? Let me tell you how I know that what's going on with the Epstein rollout both is a PR disaster and means a lot more than anybody is indicating. There are people left and right that are senior members of industry as they are exposed in these files, and their association with Jeffrey Epstein is exposed. And a lot of times it's really innocuous. It's like, this guy exchanged flirty emails with Ghislaine Maxwell in 2003, 23 years ago. And then he goes, you know what? I'm selling my business. My name associated with this woman 23 years ago is so toxic that I have to get out of the business, even though it doesn't show anything criminal. Why do you think that is? Have you ever met anybody that has had like a little bit of their evil exposed, and the first thing they do is some wildly irrational and illogical action against it? Where they just they react disproportionately more aggressively than anybody would expect? The only reason that logically makes sense to me is that there is so much more to it. And I'm going to show you that some people are starting to get there. Because some of the things that I said a year ago are now starting to be validated as these files are coming out. And that's really weird for me too. Because one, I knew the stuff I was saying was true, but I don't know how much, I don't know how much the actual numbers that people will share with me, like how much data was there or what it actually translates into. But the entirety of what's been released so far is filling up a couple hundred megabytes. And I was told, and I told Alex Jones, who lost his mind about it at the time, that there were terabytes and terabytes of data. I'm going to show you some of that in a second here too. Let me first kind of hone in on the lies of using the statistics, whether it be the red cell whether it be the economy, whether it be talking about the Dow. By the way, another example of another Trump administration official jumping up and talking about the Dow happened over the weekend. And you know what? I'm almost positive that these people don't know what the Dow is, because Peter Navarro went out and talked about it. And again, said $50,000. Guys, the Dow is an index. It's a numerical thing, and the index of the Dow is units. There's no units. Like when you were doing things in math, and you'd be like, remember, you always have to keep units alike. It's not measured in dollars. So I don't know why they keep calling it $50,000, but it's the second time I've seen that done. And we're starting to make fun of it, how silly it is. And the left is actually learning how to meme on this stuff because these people are so cartoonish. Let me start with this discussion. This is from a guy called I think it's called Finance a Lot or Financial Ocelot or something. Anyway, he's discussing the tendency of government to lie, which goes to my point that they think that you are a freaking goldfish, that you don't recognize that this always happens. Let's do jobs numbers and the downward adjustment, and then we're going to figure out who this actually serves.
That's where they will show you that it's always revised downwards. It has been revised downwards in 25 of the last 26 months. Think about that. Of the last 26 months, it has been revised downwards 25 times. So, yes, the January initial jobs data looks good. What do you think they're going to do later? Of course, they're going to revise it downwards. But then when they do that, the midterm elections are over and nobody cares anymore, right? See, this is what I mean. They're going to keep doing this. And you got to just be very careful and cognizant of what is going on so you don't make a mistake. The other thing that came out last week was CPI, and CPI also was good. It wasn't as high as they estimated. And if you look at this Bloomberg chart of CPI, you can see that it has been going up. But what you can see here is this yellow part is the largest component of CPI. And that yellow part is core services. And if you look at what's inside core services, it's things like rent and living expenses, mortgage payments. And that's what's really keeping things up here, according to the government. Now, the government controls all this data. I've made a whole episode of cell imputation when they just guesstimate what the inflation is. And it's no surprise to me that the inflation data came in a little bit better than expected. Of course, after that, the markets tanked again. So on the one side, you see how they're trying to manipulate the data to make things appear as good as they can, and they'll continue to do that until the elections, and even then after elections, they'll try and do it. But the second thing is, after the initial pop, it fades, and that's what I mean. Before, it would pop and just keep going, but nowadays, it would pop and it would fade out. And that's a sign of the general structure of the market getting weak and that there are bad things to come.
He's telling you that the people that are putting out the data have a vested interest in what the data says. It's the exact thing that you don't want. It's an interested party that weighs in. And so unlike the scientific method where you say, I have this hypothesis, and if I prove it correct, great, I'm going to do more tests. And if I prove it wrong, then I can throw it out. We'll do a couple more tests to confirm that it's wrong. But I'm not interested in the outcome. This is where government, whether it be in the law enforcement realm or in the political or in the financial realm, all of these things are problematic because government is serving itself. It's serving its own interest, which is to say, can I give you something that makes you fund me? And who's the one that's doing the funded? It's members of Congress. It's our executive branch is like driving the train here. So they want to give good data that looks good. So again, if the data is bad, then we'll just change it. He was talking about CPI or the Consumer Pricing Index. And he said that the thing that's keeping it basically static is that core services. The reason why it's not going down the way that it is being held up is because things like rent is stuck in there. So the way that you choose your index is the basket of numbers that you are going to assess. And if you don't like the way that the numbers are looking, just change the basket. This is why numbers like inflation are always questionable, and whether or not they're real is always is up for grabs. Are crime statistics really going down? Well, you can change the definition of violent crime, or you can change the way that you charge them, or you can change the cities that even report them, as we talked about on Friday. If the data is not good, then just get rid of the data. That's it. We just stop it. We're not going to collect on that anymore. Well, why not? Because it's devastating to the argument I'm making that I'm doing a great job. And there's a reason why you can't sell a golden era to people when they're experiencing things that are not a golden era. They're experiencing something else. Imagine being this man, interviewed on Fox News. You're the senior counsel for the White House. And not only do you say that the Dow is over $50,000, or the stock market is over $50,000, these are like nonsensical. That doesn't even mean anything. But telling Americans who are experiencing something very different that this is the Goldilocks economy and it hasn't been this good since the 1990s. Why did he choose 1998 as a year to specifically focus in on, I wonder? It was pre-9/11. It was pre-Y2K. It was a time when, and I saw this in a post that I did this morning, or yesterday rather. It's a post that I made that said, everybody who is 40 years old or older, if they could hit a button and go back to the analog age, they would do it. Why is that? Because prior to high-speed internet, prior to internet connectivity of cell phones and data and wireless plans that give you access to everything, everybody looks back and sees like that changeover happened somewhere between, let's say, 1996 and 2004. That 8-year period, we had a radical transformation in this country in the social way. And we have a nostalgia to look back. Anybody who's old enough to remember it goes like, yeah, things were better because things were slower and they were simpler. And as fast as things were in the 80s and the 90s, they were so much more alike to things that happened in the 50s or the 30s or the 19-teens compared to what's going on today, the speed. So here's Peter Navarro saying something. We're in a golden age. We're in a Goldilocks economy. Does anybody actually feel that way? That is not already worth somewhere between $6 and $12 million, which is his estimated net worth. Now, maybe if you're worth that kind of money, it feels awesome to you today. But I don't think that's the average person. And that's not the average experience because I meet regular people all the time. It's the nice thing about not being completely disconnected. You know, I think the people that you see that are talking about this stuff, some of them all have had so much money. None of them have done a grocery store shopping trip in a while. None of them have sat down. What did we do? I went out for pancakes yesterday with my kids after church. And we haven't done that in years. It's just like, it's not in our budget. So we just don't do that. But we were going to stay in the same area of where the church was for the afternoon. So we stayed in the area. We go to this thing. We go to a diner. And it was $100. My oldest child is 8 years old. So wife, me, and an 8, a 7, a 4, and a 2-year-old. We had 3 kids' plates and 2 adults' plates, and it was $100 for breakfast. That's just what it costs. That's what I've come to grips with that idea that that's what it is. If I sit down at a table at a restaurant, it's $100 for a couple of little kids. What's wild is like, that seems totally wrong and way, way out of proportion because my numbers, I remember being able to take a date out and spend $20 including tip for like me and a girl in my lifetime. And now I couldn't fathom getting out of a restaurant for less than $50 if it was me and my wife. And if I bring some kids along and we get a couple kids meals, then we're up to $100. Anyway, Peter Navarro is telling you this is the Goldilocks economy. This is hard to fathom.
Can you assess the macroeconomic story for us and how it's impacting citizens today?
Absolutely. It's the perfect Trump economy in 2026. It's what we call a Goldilocks economy. The last time we saw what we're seeing now was 1998. And what are we seeing? We're seeing stock market over $50,000. That's Wall Street. But we're also seeing rising real wages. That's Main Street.
What we're seeing is that you don't know what you're experiencing, and your frustrations or your difficulties or looking out at housing and seeing that to be able to step into a home is wildly expensive. Like, that's your fault, obviously. Why would you say that? First of all, and calling the Dow, saying the Dow is at $50,000 is really bizarre. I'm going to do a quick read for one of our sponsors real quick. We're going to pay bills here. These are folks that are very inexpensive. for the price of a meal with my little kids going out for breakfast, you can pay for a whole year of Patriot Protect. It's actually probably cheaper to do the Patriot Protect thing. So there you go. Patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Patriotprotect.com/Kyle. There is a link in today's show description, as usual. Guys, in 2025, the scamming capabilities got higher and worse. And what I always keep finding out too, I just got like 4 different packages of mail from my healthcare insurance company, which let me know that I was the victim of a data breach. I got an email not 2 days ago saying that my data had been breached on Substack and that they had some third-party provider that's nonstop on that. It's not just the data breaches that are the issue when it comes to these things. The scammers and the criminals have raised the stakes using AI. So now they can look at the way that you write online, or if they get hacks and access to your email, they can clone your style of writing. They can clone your voice, which is a lot more sort of dangerous for people like me who put thousands of hours of content out there on the internet. But if they were even able to access things like your text messages or phone calls, let's say that every single time you call into one of these phone banks and this call may be recorded, they can use AI to clone your voice. They can impersonate you to friends and family. They can impersonate banks that are pulling people in with all kinds of targeted scams. If you don't want to be scammed, the best way to do it is not to be on the list of people that they're going to go looking for. And your personal information is the easiest way they do it. They find them on data broker websites. There's over 240 people search engines and data brokers online. If you want to get scrubbed from that stuff, check out the folks at patriot-protect.com/KYLE. I'm sure we'll have Skip on pretty soon, rather. And we'll talk about more of these scams and kind of like how they impact. But it's nonstop. It's every quarter or so we have a little update on what's happening. And they always get worse. It doesn't get any better. Again, another reason why a lot of you would hit the button and go back 25, 30 years, because you remember that there was a time when this wasn't nearly as bad. It's the fact of life right now. So anyway, protect yourself. Check out patriot-protect.com/KYLE. Link in the show description. Save yourself 15% on an annual subscription. Make sure you're using my name at checkout if there's a spot for a promo code too, so you guys do get that discount. And it's totally inexpensive. Again, it's one time, it's one meal that you're skipping with my family on a meal that we wouldn't normally even have. And you can protect yourself from getting scammed out of potentially tens of thousands. I think Skip told me that there was like $600 a year was the average, but it usually happens $10,000 or $20,000 at a time. Sometimes it's way worse than that. I get emails all the time about these kind of things. So, all right, check them out. Let's do the meme thing. I need something that's kind of funny. I do appreciate when people look at the ridiculousness of a situation and they're able to articulate it using maybe one of my favorite movies, which is also kind of a nostalgic movie. One of my favorite movies of all time is Jaws. I used to listen to and watch it before I would go deep sea fishing, a different phase of my life 20 years ago. We would always watch it, and then we would go out early on the boat, which was way too small. We always needed a bigger boat. Somebody decided to put Pam Bondi into this Jaws scene, and I love it. I love everything about this. So you get the chief is down there chumming the water. Uh-oh. Shark time.
The Dow is over 50,000 right now.
The water's all bloody. Somebody did a really good job with this. He backs away from the water. Look at this.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
We're gonna need a bigger boat, right? Classic cut. That's what this administration is doing to itself. It's lampooning itself. And we know that there's more to it. Again, here's the original clip, so you know where they're pulling it from if you didn't see this last week.
The Dow right now is over. The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader, as I hear, Raskin. The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And
yeah, that's the Attorney General of the United States pointing out such ridiculousness, and they can't get away from it. So this is why this story is coming from the Free Press. This was off the CBS website. Epstein fallout spiraling out of control. It's not just that people's names are popping up in there. It's that the people whose names are popping up in these files are acting in a way that is far more guilty, and they're running from this and the public sphere in a way that you just don't normally see. So I've got a clip that we put together not too long ago. This was a super clip of people saying ridiculous stuff. This is an Epstein superclip, and it only went to July of last year. The reason why they can't get out of their way is because they set up this trap. They did. Not me, not you, not people on the left or the right, not Tom Massey. Okay? The Trump administration, before they got into office, set this up. Their own people did it. Let me read a quick thing from the story, and then I'm going to show you the evidence that he actually went after it. It's Epstein fallout. It's the phrase that all the writers are using. When Casey Wasserman announced that he was going to sell his eponymously named talent, music, and sports agency. He's 51 years old, described as a powerhouse agency in the New York Times, employed some 4,000 people around the globe, and he has to unload the creation because just being in that email, that tranche, just having emails going back to 2003 is enough for people to go, I better get away from this or I'm going to lose everything. I better sell something while I still have value. Why would that be? Well, it's because there was a huge expectation set up. And it wasn't for all the people saying that Donald Trump didn't say he was going to do it. He did. Here's 2 different episodes. I'm not going to play the entire of this clip because it's got like some Hava Nagila crap in the background. But 2 different times when he said that he would, he directly said, I would release this stuff. And it's because he doesn't understand what the lure is to Americans, apparently. He thinks that you have the memory of a goldfish.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
It's just very strange for a lot of people that the list of clients that went to the island has not been made public.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it. Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. That is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable how little he understands about what's going on with this. And this is the thing, like it's never going to go away. Here's what Donald Trump thinks it's about. And again, the people that are involved that have their names in there know that there's something else. And the reason I know that is because of the way that they're behaving. It turns out people that used to be on podcasts and talking about this stuff for a long time, the people who are now currently running the FBI and used to run the FBI last year, used to know that. Here's what Trump said. This is how I know he doesn't get it. I don't know who his advisors are. I know that he's got Susie Wiles around him, but I don't have special insight into what happens in the White House. My insight is pretty specific to what goes on at the FBI. More on that in a second. But he's clearly getting advised by people who don't have a pulse on the American experience. The same kind of people that would have a Peter Navarro go out there and say, the Dow's at $50,000, whatever the hell that means. And this is a Goldilocks economy. So quit your bitching. And having Pam Bondi do the shark routine where she pops up and scares the guy on the boat, which is what she said at the hearing. To go out and message things that are like Americans are hip to it now. They may have been goldfish for a long period of time, but now people are looking. Let me just ask you this. Do you remember that we had a whole thing, like this whole big deal last year at this time of year, 1 year ago, about Doge? We were going to cut all the government waste. Does anyone remember how the audit of Fort Knox went? I went looking for the story. There is no audit of Fort Knox. Donald Trump was going to go to Fort Knox. Elon Musk was going to go to Fort Knox and they were going to live stream it. Am I completely nuts? Our live chat's up here. Do you guys not recall that? Was there not a time when there was a small expectation that there was going to be a live stream of the richest man in the world and the most powerful person, the president of the United States, live streaming the gold at Fort Knox so that we could see where it was? And then why do we not hear anything more about it? Oh, because the Treasury Secretary said, you know what, we do an audit every year and the audit's fine, right? The audit's fine. They do it every year. We can trust the government to do their own numbers. We already know that government numbers are shit. They always have been. The government numbers only serve the people that are in the government. It doesn't mean that the gold's not at Fort Knox. It just means that I just don't trust anything they have to say. And this is the clip that lets me know Donald Trump doesn't even understand what it is that is at stake with the Epstein stuff. Ready? Listen to this.
And no, he made a statement about me and Jeffrey Epstein. I have nothing to do with that. I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. And in fact, if you look at the DOJ, they announced, they released 3 million pages. It's like this is all they're supposed to be doing. And frankly, the DOJ, I think, should just say, we have other things to do, because that whole thing has turned out, other than Bill Clinton and, Bill Gates and lots of people that there are a lot of questions about it, but nothing on me. But it was even sort of better than that because they found that Jeffrey Epstein and this sleazebag writer named Michael Wolff were conspiring against Donald Trump to lose the election. So Epstein was conspiring with a writer for me to lose the election. So right there, you know that I had nothing to do with this guy. But yeah, it's a terrible thing. The amount of time that's being wasted. You know, when Epstein was alive, like 10 years ago, nobody cared about it. But they're only doing it. But now it's really hitting back on them because Bill Clinton is such a big part of it. The Democrats are pushing it. And the problem is that it's turning out to be the Democrats that were with and conspired with Epstein. So I think you're probably going to see a little pullback from them. But think of it. They were working together to try and help me lose the election. But this is the Oval Office, so I guess that didn't work out too well.
So I won the election. It was all about me. It's all about me. I guess if you're just a chronic narcissist and everybody around you just like, you know, like lifts your balls up for you whenever you need them so they can wipe you. If you were that tone deaf to the reality. And part of this is because I think Trump is surrounded by a bunch of people who have tons of money and they don't have any idea. And they do kiss his ass for things that don't make any sense. He thinks this is about him. That's pretty clear. He's worried about it because he thinks it's about him, or at least that's what he messages out loud. And then from what we hear in the background, he's also worried about his friends. That sounds more likely. He's worried about people that are connected to him. His legacy is going to be the Epstein administration. Doesn't matter what else he did, because he doesn't get it. His people said it. He said it. They all said it. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump at the end of the day. The regular American says, I'm concerned about the Epstein files for a couple of reasons. It proves a two-tiered system of justice. For a guy to be a complete dirtbag and do all kinds of dirtbag things and then plead to one count of soliciting a prostitute underage, if that's that was the worst consequence, then he was put in prison in 2019. So he got to live free for 11 years with basically no consequences, and nobody stopped associating with him. People met him and said, he's gross. I'll never be in a room with him again unless I happen to be on a boat with my captain and my kids and my nanny and my wife and my friends. Then we'll just go to the island and go have dinner with him because he's gross and we would never be alone with him unless it was at his private island, which seemed like a really nice way to stop off and go have dinner for an hour. It was only an hour, except for the fact that Howard Lutnick, the current Commerce Secretary, also apparently had a $50,000 table that Epstein bought. There's emails coming out, all these things, and all these people are running away from it. Here's the craziest part. You ready? This was a story I found. We did this, I think, on Friday. A businessman named in the files was replaced as the chairman of a major logistics company. All right? Newly released email shows a years-long friendship. Sultan Ahmed bin Salman, or Salyamen, or whatever. I don't care what his name is. He had to step down. He's not the only one. Look at this list that I found. This is from Business Insider. Epstein files, serious consequences, people who were in there and what they've done. And there's just a blast radius. So Kathy Rumler was someone we talked about the other day. She's a Goldman Sachs attorney. She resigned. She's gone. Brad Karp, high-powered attorney, he resigned as chairman of Paul Weiss. Peter Attia, I don't know, whatever. CBS contributor. Stepped down as the chief science officer. Howard Lutnick, under fire, still good to go. But now he's on the massive defensive. Steve Tisch, owner of the Giants, major fallout, talking about working girls and women's ages and nationalities and so on. People are discussing whether or not that violates their their conduct. Here's this Casey Wasserman guy. He has to sell off his talent agency. Sarah Ferguson, ex-wife of Prince Andrew, also shown in there. Said some things, said he was gross, said no one would contact him again. Boom. She's in contact. Now she says she has to backtrack it and nobody wants to make comments. Another guy, he's an ambassador, the UK's ambassador to the United States. He had to quit. Peter Mandelson. Anybody that's in there, this is so toxic. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump at this point. It shows like a system of elitism. And then there's the other piece of it that everyone kind of like, you're mad at people for talking about it. We're talking about abusing kids or potentially ritualistically doing all kinds of other awful things. And the Trump administration actually knew this was an issue. They knew it was an issue. They played on this issue. They talked it up 1 year ago in February of last year. Here's what it looked like for the first couple of months of the Trump administration, which is why it is now the Epstein administration.
DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump. I'm reviewing that.
Flashback. Who has Jeffrey Epstein's
Black Book?
Black Book.
FBI. That's under direct control of the director of the FBI.
The Senate has confirmed Kash Patel as the new director of the FBI. He was another controversial choice.
That's why you don't have a Black Book.
That Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. I'm just going to throw this out there, Armacost. You think that would be valuable to an intelligence apparatus to have blackmail material on people on video doing things with young women they shouldn't be doing in case you need a, let's say, favor later? Hey, it'd be a real shame if this got out, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Dan, I think that'd be very helpful. Yes.
I think, yeah, maybe. We need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee-deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it.
Newly sworn-in FBI Director Kash Patel named popular podcaster Dan Bongino as the deputy director of the agency.
The Black Book is not just sitting. I mean, that's Hoover power times 10.
And to me, that's a thing I think President Trump should run on. On day one, roll out the Black Book. And not just that. On day one, roll out all of the text messaging communications we were told were deleted. They overclassify 50% of the stuff there to protect the deep state. Oh, no, you can't see that. Nothing to see here.
You know, Epstein's an intelligence asset for people in the Middle East, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, you sure of that? The person, let's say, is like, I'm absolutely sure of that. That he's either a witting or unwitting asset, intelligence asset.
I want to talk to you about the Epstein case. I have worked on this for years, trying to get those records of who flew on Epstein's plane and who helped him build this international human trafficking, sex trafficking ring. Now, earlier, I urged then Chairman Durbin to subpoena those records, and I ended up being blocked by Senator Durbin and Christopher Wray. They stonewalled on this. And I know that breaking up these trafficking rings is important to President Trump. So will you work with me on this issue so we know who worked with Jeffrey Epstein in building these sex trafficking rings?
Absolutely, Senator. Child sex trafficking has no place in the United States of America, and I will do everything, if confirmed as FBI director, to make sure the American public knows the full weight of what happened in the past.
Evidence from Jeffrey Epstein's safe went missing after an FBI raid, court hears in Ghislaine Maxwell trial. How the hell do you lose evidence in a case this big? Is it lost? Was it lost, if you get what I mean? I don't know.
You know, it's the same thing with Epstein's list. It's like, what the hell are these Republicans doing?
Regardless of who may be embarrassed in the release of that list, why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
And the FBI handed over a couple hundred pages of documents. But, you know, Sean, I gave them a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. to get us everything. And a source had told me where the documents were being kept. Southern District of New York, shock. So we got them all by, hopefully all of them, Friday at 8 a.m., thousands of pages of documents. I have the FBI going through them, and Kash is also, now that we have Kash here, it's a game changer, of course, and Kash is going to, Director Patel, is going to get us a detailed report as to why the FBI withheld all of those documents.
Okay. End of flashback.
Because you said last week that you have the Epstein files on your desk. When can we see them, and what's taking so long to release them?
I do. Jesse, there are well over, this will make you sick, 200 victims. 200. So we have well over 250 actually. So we have to make sure that their identity is protected and their personal information. But other than that,
I've got 15 minutes of those little short clips of all the statements being made, and that was up to July of last year. And apparently they think that you're a goldfish, and you won't remember any of that. There were hundreds of victims. All the files are on my desk. Donald Trump says they were conspiring against me, so it was always about me. Do they not understand what's happening? This is why you have fallout. This is why it's spiraling, because you never once picked up the thing that you said. You never acknowledged the moment that you said something and you didn't live up to that thing. It's not about Donald Trump. It's not. She didn't have 3.5 million files on her desk. And by the way, that's a fraction of what was out there as far as we can tell. And that may be the most troubling part. I'm going to show you something. First of all, let me tease it to you so I can prime your brain for it. This is an email that came out of the files. This is an email from somebody at the Washington field office in the FBI, which is my old office. And it was sent on Monday, March 10th, 2025. As far as I can tell, this is a legit email. This is exactly what FBI emails looks like. And it's talking about 50D, New York, 30, 75, 71. That's the case. That's the Epstein case. And so somebody sent this from somebody at WFO to unknown people at Washington Field, some people at FBI New York, and a couple of others at Washington Field that were CC'd on it. And it said, working with OTD remotely now. OTD is the Operational Technology Division. To start the data archives unpacking, we'll advise when this step is complete. We have a total time to restore estimate. We are looking at a total of approximately 14.6 terabytes of archived data to unpack. Remember that number. I've already uploaded and verified 1B 146 optical media to DCAP. 1B is the physical evidence that the FBI has. That's going to go into the places like, I think, if memory serves, it's been a while since I've done this, but 1B I think is the Elsher guys. So that's the electronics evidence people. And there's another 1B 136. So 146 and 136 is secured, and we can determine the best way to move forward with the obscene material. So CSAM, child sexual assault material, the stuff that's violent crimes against children, all that. Please let me know of any questions, thanks, concern, and then it's a supervisory special agent. It's some supervisor somewhere. And then above it, there was another email that said, restored the first set, 8.5 terabytes, kicked off successful. We'll let you know about the timing tomorrow. Once that's completely restored, we'll start the second restore job, about 6 terabytes. If you were to add them together, you get to about 4.5 terabytes. Let me know who I should provide access on DCAP, DCAP. I'm not familiar with that system. At your earliest convenience, thanks, and that's obscured as well, but all related to this thing. So 14.5 terabytes of data, right? That's what's being discussed.
A Channel 4 News investigation today reveals that all those pictures, emails, videos and messages released by the Department of Justice, said to be over 3 million pages, may amount to just a fraction of the Epstein material obtained by investigators. Why do we think that? Because these raids on Epstein's properties, his Florida mansion in 2005, and his fancy New York townhouse and sprawling luxury island in 2019 saw dozens of devices, computers, hard drives and servers bagged and tagged and brought to FBI offices for examination. Now, emails examined by Channel 4 News show investigators discussing those very devices. From the earliest stages, investigators were talking about Epstein's data totaling many, many times what has so far been released. In June 2020, one wrote, "We expect the data to be somewhere around 20 to 40 terabytes," noting that the total capacity of the devices was up to 50 terabytes. Then as recently as last year, long after the investigations into Epstein and his associates had ended, the figures quoted remained massive. We're looking at a total of approximately 14.6 terabytes of archived data, said another email. To put that in context, it is almost 15,000 gigabytes. But now, a year on from that, the total data released, claimed to be some 300 gigabytes, accounts for just 2% of the total Epstein data that officials were discussing just last year. Under the Epstein
Act, they're supposed to release this stuff. It's not about Donald Trump. But they play you for a goldfish. This is a clip from InfoWars, March 25th. It was 2 weeks after that email talking about 14.5 terabytes of data.
You hear stuff from the Trump administration right now. There's two things that are happening. We're seeing actions. We're seeing executive orders where people are making, statements. They're going out. He's signing the document and saying this is what's going to happen next. But then you've also got this other piece where you go, yeah, but is it really going on? We were told we were going to get the Epstein binders day one. We were going to all see all the information and it didn't come out. So we're kind of in this like now we need verification. I just listen to what people say and then I go and see if folks can actually validate that. I've got friends that are working at headquarters. I got a couple of them at this point. There are friends of mine. It turns out when you become an FBI whistleblower, less and less people talk to you. They just don't want to get involved. But a few of them that are not scared, that are courageous and said they'd be happy to like both lose their job and shut this agency down if it had to be done. They've gone out and proactively told me, it's like, look, we've broken servers. We've had so many people accessing them to do this work. We've been working through the weekends.
You just showed me this.
Yeah, no, I'm literally showing you the people that we're talking about here. They've reached out to me and said, yeah, we have all hands on deck. I meant to go do something because he was going to go meet one of my friends, wasn't able to do so. And he's like, look, dude, I got stuff going on. I can't because we have all hands on deck meetings talking about Epstein files. We are doing the redactions. We are doing the things that were said. And then completely independent of that, I got another buddy who's much further to the west of Washington, D.C., and I'll just leave it nebulously at that, who reached out and said, I was looking for a printer. I was on my network, and they must be so actively trying to steel box this up, because when you start having too many people touch the exact same files on government computers, we had a joke, Alex, when you were working on FBI computer systems, we would always say that the motto of FBI IT is yesterday's technology tomorrow. They're just crap. They're just the worst computers you could ever have. And so apparently they crashed them all. And my guess is they started moving to more and more stable servers and accidentally opened up the permissions to people, including another buddy who had nothing to do with it. And he was like, oh yeah, I just saw there were like 14 terabytes of Epstein files.
And you were showing me, they're saying more victims than Bondi even said. I mean, this is like just massive.
Yeah, I think the information will continue to roll out as they can. But at the end of the day,
they're shocked by how when you say terabytes, they're saying it's massive.
Yeah, like 14 terabytes is like that's
so it's not a couple hundred pages like they gave Bondi.
Correct. No, that was always going to be nonsense. So
it appears from this information that you actually showed me, the information on your phone, this is real. It's very aggressive, like she says.
I think there's no reason.
Get it? They started doing redactions in late February, like a year ago, maybe early March of last year, so that they could release the files, and then they pretended like they couldn't. And then we're supposed to forget that they actually released some. Remember, why are people talking about it today in a way they didn't before? Can I share with you? This is it. Here, hold on.
Exclusive.
Ready?
Breaking exclusive. Breaking exclusive.
The reason why this is a deal today, and it wasn't a deal in the Biden administration, and it wasn't something under the previous Trump administration, is because previously there was an active investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, and then theoretically into his co-conspirators, as we've been led to believe. There was previously investigations being done by DOJ, by FBI, and when you have an ongoing investigation, you're never going to give all the information out. That's not possible. The reason why you have the saber rattling and the so-called political grandstanding of people like Ro Khanna, and people are mad at Tom Massey about this, they could not ask for those files previously and get it done, because there was an active investigation. But that all changed at the end of that 15-minute clip that I started showing you. It all changed when they said the investigation is over. There are no co-conspirators that are going to be charged. There will be no more investigations into it. Now this is an archive file. It is a closed case, administratively closed, no prosecution, whether it was declined or otherwise. That's when Congress can step in, pass the law, and say, this is no longer something that is actively being investigated, and so therefore it's something that we can ask the American public to view with their own eyes. That's the reason. Do you understand that? For all of the spin and the Donald Trump saying we've released all the files and we're the most transparent, we've done all these good things for you. No. Nobody could do it before. You had an opportunity to do it after July. You had the people that spent years talking about it in positions of power to be able to come out and give information. And then all of them step up and they go, okay, we're going to force. They fought against it tooth and nail. You had Mike Johnson saying there were national security concerns that were at play, when that doesn't make any sense when we're talking about a simple child sex trafficking and like, you know, a financier. What possible CI motives could you have in there? What possible CT? What national security is one of two things: counterintelligence, intelligence services, and foreign intelligence; counterterrorism, foreign terrorist entities that are trying to harm the United States and maybe state sponsors of it. What did Jeffrey Epstein have to do with any of those things? We're not led to believe that was the case. So why did we not declassify everything? What's there? And the reason why we can ask that now is because the DOJ sent out a memo, and they did it like a bunch of cowards. They did it on a Sunday night, at night, in the middle of a massive flood that took place in Texas a year ago. And they said, we are no longer doing an investigation, and there are no people that we are going to be investigating, and there are no further charges, and there are no conspirators, and there are no client lists, and we got nothing. And so all of this work that was done for all the years that it was done, and all the original soft handling of this man, it's all in the back. It's in the rearview mirror. And then everybody who wanted to know more realized that you now have an opportunity to say this is not an active investigation. Remember the things that we were going to get transparency on. JFK, I'm not even confident we got all that. If there's probably way more. Same story, 9/11, haven't gotten all the stuff on this. Like, why is it that our government wants to keep us from paying attention? They just give us a new silver alert and hope that we're going to do this. They hope that we're going to goldfish and forget. And just remember, the economy's awesome. It's so great. How dare you think otherwise? This is the quote unquote MAGA position. This is the Fox News, which I would tell you is basically state-sponsored media position. This is Joey Jones. I got no problem with Joey Jones. He seems like, I don't know him, but his public persona seems like he's a nice enough guy. But here he is basically giving you the official narrative coming from this administration that America First is winning and everything is awesome.
I got one thing to say to Gavin Newsom. Donald Trump is absolutely temporary. I'm temporary, you're temporary. We're here for a finite amount of time. America First is not temporary. The effect of Donald Trump on this country is not temporary, and that should be the scariest thing in the world to Democrats, to think that there might be somebody out there who could carry the policies and the strength that Donald Trump has created among Americans, a majority of Americans, and not have the baggage that they've assigned to Donald Trump because he lived this colorful life for decades before he entered into public office. That should be so scary to Democrats. Sitting there saying something as naive as Donald Trump is temporary. Donald Trump knows Donald Trump is temporary. Why do you think he's at it again? Why do you think he wanted a second term? Why do you think it's so important to him to leave a legacy that changes this country back in the direction it went for so long and was so prosperous? To think that Donald Trump is temporary as a negative thing for Republicans or a positive thing for Democrats, that might show the lack of political acumen that Gavin Newsom has more than anything I've seen.
Was that not one of the silliest things that you could listen to? Does it sound like it's at all in touch with the actual reality of regular people? Donald Trump's legacy is going to be the Epstein administration. That's what he's created for himself by failing to read the situation on the ground, by failing to understand that under his administration, they arrested Epstein. He apparently killed himself, per their guys. And then they ended the investigation and nobody else was going to be brought to justice because there was nobody to be brought to justice. And then they rolled out a couple of files and binders. And then they said that we're working on these things. And then they said that the client files are on my desk. They have guys who talked about it for years, that the black book is under the control of the FBI, that the people, that the guy was an intelligence asset, that he was the greatest blackmailer in the world. That's a member of the cabinet, the Trump administration cabinet. They said all of these things, and nobody has had the decency to turn around to Americans and just say, look, we were full of crap. We didn't know what we were talking about. We knew that's what you wanted, and we gave you what you wanted. We fed you slop, and it was wrong. And here's the real story, which is passed into federal law that we must give you. Nope. They don't do that. They don't even have the decency to do that for you. And then you're going to get Fox News telling you everything is awesome. Like the Lego song. I saw one of you in the chat mention the Lego song. That's a great song, by the way. The world is amazing. This is a Goldilocks economy. Everything you hope for is happening. Even if it's just the numbers that we're lying about. I saw this Dave Smith quote, appearance on Rogan. This is more realistic to me. We spent the last 25 years doing empire games, which reminds me of grabbing oil tankers and not talking about it. 7 oil tankers, 50 million gallons of oil, 50 million barrels of oil picked up. That's the same sort of mentality that I think Americans thought they were not getting with Donald Trump, because these always have a hidden cost. So let's distract you with an old lady in Arizona, and we just found a glove in the desert, and it was 2 miles away from the house. Guys, do you know how many houses, how many people, how many gloves exist in a 2-mile radius of any given house in America? Like, how many gloves will you be able to find on the ground after COVID, after all the weird shit that we went through as a country? It's crazy. Here's Dave Smith talking about, where did the money go? Why are things so crazy? And why are people who are young screwed?
25 years, we've spent close to $10 trillion on wars, you know, and they didn't tax the American people for that, because they know they couldn't tax us enough to pay. We would put an end to it. If they tried to raise everybody's taxes enough to come up with $10 trillion because we want to go fight regime change wars all over the Middle East, the American people would have been like, no, we're not doing that. But they didn't do that. They kept taxes where they were. I think they even cut some rates during those years, the top rates. And then they borrowed the rest, and they still couldn't borrow enough, so they just print the money. And then essentially what happens is that the price of everything just goes up and up and up. And you just put more money into the system, and then people start looking around and going like, geez, why is the price of housing and healthcare and energy and childcare totally unaffordable? And the answer is because you're paying for the war in Iraq. And nobody thinks about it like that. But that's really what's going on. They can't. So for all the young people who are coming out of college now, and they're like, I'm 150 grand in debt. I have a gender studies major degree or whatever, you know, maybe something better than that. But they got an English degree or something. And they're working at DoorDash. And the average house is going for 600 grand. And they're like, what am I possibly going to do? It's like the reason why these kids are all demanding socialism, at least on the left, is because, like, what else are you going to do? Like, how do you even... But the reason why that is the case is because your government decided to spend trillions of dollars on blowing up brown countries, and in some cases then rebuilding them to blow them up again. I mean, this is the actual cost of the thing. And I feel like it's... almost nobody outside of like the Ron Paul libertarians, the Austrian economics guys, almost nobody else ever makes this connection. That it's like, this is the deal. You can't be a world empire without having a central bank that can print money for you, because otherwise it just doesn't work. Resources are finite and you'll run out of them. And so you can't do that without having this monetary system. But the cost of this monetary system is that prices always go up and up and up and up. And that rigs the entire economy against the working class and the middle class in favor of the rich. It's just...
He's talking about the pyramid scheme that's been going on, but he's also missing the other piece of it. After we go and destroy those places, which definitely happens, then we go ahead and import them, and then we feel like we have to support them, and then you end up with incredible amounts of fraud because somebody who brought them in knew that they were a capable, you know, sort of heart situation for the American public, and so you can go and you can throw a bunch of money at it, and a lot of that money could come back into your own pocket. Our kids are coming out of college with guys my age are out of college who went to college when I went to college, and they still have the equivalent of a mortgage hanging over their head from student loan debts. Now, that's their own fault. I'm 100% behind agency. I paid off the debts that we had. My wife paid off the debts that we had existing. Her parents helped with some of them, but we ended up paying off, like, I don't know, I think we ended up paying $30,000 or $40,000 of total college loan debts because she had a master's degree and some, you know, we threw a lot of money at that problem so that we didn't have debt. And that's a real bummer. Like, nobody wants to do that. It's not fun, especially after you've already gotten it and you're like, I don't even know if I could do it again, I don't think I would pay for college at the same way that I did. And I didn't even pay that much for college. But all that said, I've got buddies that are in their 40s, late 40s, coming up on 50 years old that still have $100,000 worth of student loan debt because they were allowed to defer it, and they were allowed to let that be capitalized, And then they found out that their $50,000 debt turned into like $80,000. And then as it continued to build and they're just paying interest-only payments, it continued to build and build. And they weren't even getting ahead of these things. It's terrible decision-making, but you're seeing people they're coming out into their young adulthood life with the equivalent of a mortgage, but not the house that actually is the mortgage because they're paying for this nonsense. And it's because the dollar's not worth anything. How many of you look back and figure out like what you paid for college and then you look at what college cost today and you're like, how on earth does that make any sense? How is that deal being done? You know, I know people that got PhDs from exclusive schools that paid like a couple $1,000s a year, like $4,000 a year for a semester, you know, $2,000, $2,800. They remember doing it. I used to get a thing from the bursar's office. It was $1,680 for all my college credits in 1981. It's like, okay. It's still, it's such an atrocious idea that we've done that. And the other thing that I think Dave Smith actually gets wrong is that it's always being paid. It is always getting paid. He's right about the monetary system writing it off. I like Milton Friedman's talk about this. The real cost, there's never an unbalanced budget in the history of the government. And we have another one, and Trump has blown out spending. This is the other problem. People thought he was going to go out there, curtail spending. That's a Republican position, which he's not. It's a conservative position to curtail spending. They thought he was going to cut government because the only way you were going to get a government that was funded by tariffs was actually cutting the government by like 90%. We're in the middle of a DHS shutdown starting this morning or yesterday. And guess what? None of you will notice. None of you will, unless you work for DHS or a DHS contractor. This is the universal fun game about it. We find out that when you shut down government, nobody notices because government doesn't provide a thing that any of you actually need in your life. And I think that's why so many people are sitting there going, you know, in 1997 or 1998, which is what Peter Navarro talked about, the last time that we had the Goldilocks economy, guess what? Our debt was under 10 trillion. And now it's like coming up on 40. So in the last 25 years, we've blown through 30 plus trillion dollars and every single budget was balanced. It was just balanced on the back of people that weren't even born yet. And now they get to pay it.
Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein.
That is not the one I wanted yet. Although that is a fun little Jeffrey Epstein clip from Bongino. It's just showing the fact that these people have all changed their tune. 1 second here. Grab my clip. Here's Milton Friedman talking about it.
Keep your eye on one thing and one thing only, how much government is spending. Because that's the true tax. Every budget is balanced. There is no such thing as an unbalanced federal budget. You're paying for it. If you're not paying for it through it in the form of explicit taxes, you're paying for it indirectly in the form of inflation or in the form of borrowing. The thing you should keep your eye on is what government spends.
That's it. The government spends it. We're all paying one way or another. There's no such thing as an unbalanced budget. They just inflate it and they steal from you. If you have an inflation rate, and the agreed deal is right now in America, for those that are not paying attention or haven't paid attention, the agreed optimal situation is that your savings will lose 2% of its value every year. 2%. It's actually month on month, so it's actually worse than that. That's the agreement. That a great economy, as we've structured it currently, is a 2% loss of value in your dollar every single time that they do a look at it. You had $1 in your account, it's worth 98 cents in 30 days. And then it's worth 97.2 cents or 96.8 or whatever the hell the 2% loss is. You're just going to continue to lose at a rate as it inflates. Was it worse under other people? Yeah, of course. The rates have changed. They've gotten way worse and they've gotten way less worse. But it's always getting worse because of the way that we've actually agreed that that's how the house of cards works. So you know what they do in the federal government? They give you a cost of living raise. They give you an assessment that says, well, we figure that your dollar is worth this much less after the year. It's 3.8%. It's 2.6%. It's 1.9%. And they just kind of assess, like, this is how much your buying power has gone down based on inflation, which by the way, we cherry pick the numbers to make the inflation look better than it is. We've done that. And so we're going to pay you more. So your cost always, your salary always increases under the federal government. They're going to give you all this adjustment. And all that does is put more money back in because the federal government doesn't create any money. It just spends it. And it spends it from you. Always, every single year. So you have a combination there. Milton Friedman telling you every single budget is balanced. Anything we spend, it is getting paid. And it's getting paid through inflation and printing out dollars. And apparently you're a Goldilocks economy. It's the best it's ever been. Ain't that something? It's troubling because they look at you like you have no ability to process or remember anything. And the minute you start asking questions like, hey, didn't you say this thing a few minutes ago? Now you're a doomer, or you're a black pillar, or you're the problem. You're a panikin, whatever these words are. Like, they made up words to be able to characterize people. How about we just say, we think you're a freaking goldfish. Your job is to shut up and applaud. Somebody said the other day, the bread is stale and the circus is not very entertaining, but they are still keeping you going with bread and circus. So we'll get congressional hearings, but we don't get anybody held accountable. We'll get great big news stories and big file releases, but nobody gets prosecuted. At some point, this has to fall. You can only build this rickety, pyramid scheme for so long. It's a giant Ponzi scheme, right? What happens to every single Ponzi scheme? At some point, they collapse. At some point, people withdraw and they pull out whatever their credit is. In this case, it's the faith and credit of the American people. And it's pretty obvious to me that it's going away. And it may be that this Epstein story will be the thing that does it. Because people put a lot of hope in that there were some bad people, that they were going to be held accountable. And you can even see in the way that they're actually even behaving, there is a massive list of people who realize that their name in this file is damning enough that they have to sell off their assets, that they have to remove themselves from polite society. They have to go and take a lower profile position. They cannot subsist. Even just the fact that they did some silly text messages 20 something years ago with somebody, or that they were sending some emails that were flirtatious. It tells me that there is far worse in there. And as we're finding out, they've given us just a tiny little fraction of what that is, even though they're required to give it to us. Isn't it funny that the stuff that we saw under COVID made most Americans realize that we were being lied to at an incredible rate? For those of you that recall the death counters, has anyone ever explained that to us? Have any mainstream media outlets ever had the freaking balls? That's what it would take. The balls to step up and say, we ran a counter telling you how many Americans were dying from COVID every single second. We pretended to have real-time data about death numbers in America, which take us 6 months to a year to get. We get them in arrears. They happen quarterly at best, and they're always revised. But we made up numbers to show you how scary this stuff was. And it was complete, utter, nonsensical, fake bullshit. And they've never once told you otherwise. And a lot of Americans went, oh, if you say something on media, it is meant for consumption. It is meant to have me act a certain way, but it does not have any reality to it. There's nothing that holds them together. And I've showed you guys the clips of Megyn Kelly saying that she knew that when she was in her Fox News job, she knew she was supposed to say things a certain way. It's the same on the other side. We get opposition. You're either part of the state-run media or you're part of the state-run controlled opposition. These are the two things you get to bandy behind, and nobody gets to go out there and represent the bacon cheeseburger nationalist position, which is screw all of you. You're a bunch of lying scumbags. We want truth. We'll take it no matter how ugly it is. We'll just rip the damn Band-Aid off. We can handle it, or we can't, and it'll crash everything, and that'll be fine too. We'll figure it out. And the dominant culture in America is not whatever it is that you've been trying to sell us. The average person is now right of both political parties. They've both marched off to this thing, and they're dragging us along, acting like we're all going to buy it. And people are going, nope. There is almost, I would say that there is a huge number of people on both parties that can get together and agree that pedophiles and creeps and men who are in their 40s and 50s that have tons of money that are abusing young girls between the ages of 13 and 17, they're totally not pedophiles, sure, by definition, but they're totally scumbags and disgusting, and we don't want them. We can get really, really all behind that. That Christian and Western values mean that we have to stand behind protecting women and children, which is the future and the most vulnerable. Or you can do what Alan Dershowitz. This time period is coming to an end. I have to believe it. It doesn't mean that like everything ends. I just think that nobody's going to buy this kind of slop anymore.
I've known you for years. I don't really know why you like to defend these high-profile clients. Everybody certainly deserves a defense, including Mr. Epstein, including O.J. Simpson, and you and I had wars over Bill Clinton back in the day.
Sure.
You've taken on these high-profile cases. Why? And do you regret it at all? And did you ever see anything untoward about Mr. Epstein?
I never did, and I do regret having ever met Jeffrey Epstein because it caused me the worst few years of my life when I was falsely accused, and I was canceled by the 92nd Street Y, canceled by Temple Emmanuel, and then she ultimately admitted that she may have confused me with someone else, and so, you know, things obviously have gotten a lot better. Now, of course, these revelations put my name in the headlines again, but I've never been afraid of that because I have nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be ashamed of. I did nothing wrong. Would I do it again? Not if I knew I was going to be falsely accused, but if not for that, I've represented far worse people. I've represented murderers. I've represented people who have done terrible, terrible things. That's an essential part of our system. If I don't do it, who will? I had tenure. I had an obligation to defend the most controversial, the worst people. Sometimes I won, sometimes I lost. Sometimes I created a plea bargain like I did in this case. By the way, Epstein was furious at me for the plea bargain. He wouldn't pay my fee because he thought I had done a terrible job because he ended up going to jail and having to report as a sex offender. The rest of the world thought it was a sweetheart. But that's what criminal defense lawyers do. I'm 85 years old. I hope the good Lord gives me the strength to continue to represent the most despised, the most controversial, the most unpopular people in the world. Look at the hell I got for representing Donald Trump. I did that, and I lost a lot of my friends. And people say to me all the time, oh, I understand Epstein, but not Trump. Or I understand Trump, but not Epstein. You have to understand that the role of the criminal defense lawyer is to defend everybody who's falsely accused.
Well, I'll say this.
Who may be accused or even truthfully accused. Yeah.
So there you have it. Guys, he never saw anything untoward. He's just a client. He wasn't the worst guy that he ever dealt with. Okay? And if you thought he was, it's probably on you. And that's why Sean Hannity has to have him on and have this nice discussion with them. Meanwhile, people whose names are in the files are disappearing from public life. Why would that be? I mean, you tell me. I don't know the answer. But it leads me to believe that there's a lot worse in there than some emails. Because I don't, if somebody calls me up and tells me they're going to do a hit piece on something someone said about me that I know is not true, or what they said is completely over exaggerated, I just go, yeah, run the story. I don't care. You want to comment on it? Here's what really happened. The end. You're going to see me disappear? You're going to see me hide? You're going to see me start issuing like a bunch of cover? No, I don't care. Because that's how normal people react. When normal people see, it's like, well, that's the worst you got on me? Okay, fine. Yeah, run it. Do your best. I'm not leaving my job. I'm not quitting what I do. There's got to be way worse than that. This is just another one. This is Politico. I'll put this in the links again. All right. That's where I want to go. Since we're talking about sort of doom and gloom stuff, I have kind of a funny palate cleanse about that, and a woman talking about the end of times and what else. And it's a good reminder that there are these Western values, and it turns out we used to know that. In 1998, there was no such thing as gay marriage, for whatever it's worth, guys. Nobody did gay marriage. Nobody thought that was a reasonable idea, including Democrats. That's how far we've moved, to the point where the president of today, the quote-unquote most conservative president in your lifetime, all the people that love Donald Trump, he's pro-gay marriage. There is a slippery slope. It's kind of funny how right all the people that were talking about these things could slide this way. When you keep sliding over and over, further and further to the left, it gets there. Can't stop it. Anyhow, we'll talk about that, because traditional marriage may be the answer for some of you. Traditional marriage, aka actual marriage. All right. Before we get to all that, if you're still watching and you haven't liked this video, can you do me a favor? Hit the like. I'd appreciate that. Doesn't matter if you're on Rumble, if you're on YouTube. You can't watch on X anymore in the same way. They just disappear. So X is screwed up. I just got to notice we're going to start streaming over on Facebook again, because why not? And apparently it didn't want to connect to Facebook. I don't know what I need to do there, but as usual, our reach is our reach. And if you guys are part of the channel anywhere, I appreciate it. If you're not, make sure you guys have subscribed. Check us out on Spotify if you guys want to find the show after the fact. If you're looking for something, if you got freezes or issues streaming, you can always find us at KyleSeraphinShow.com. There's always a clean upload over there. Sometimes there's some intermittent advertisements, which help pay the bills here, and I'm appreciative for them. Locals, you guys can join us at KyleSeraphin.com. So Kyle Seraphin Show for the show. KyleSeraphin.com for the community if you want to be part of all that. And wherever it is, share with a friend. That's the easiest way to make the show grow. Cost you nothing. If there's something that meant something, give them a timestamp. Tell somebody, hey, listen to this argument at this time. Or, hey, look at this bonehead at this time. Or look at this crazy compilation. I'm going to give you guys the 11-minute compilation over at on the Locals channel too, because it's freaking wild. It's freaking wild, all the stuff that these people said, and then they're going to act like you don't remember that any of this happened. The Goldfish thing, it's going to continue to be a theme of this podcast, unfortunately. It's just as bad as the laser pointer and the cat, for those of you that remember. It's like they show you the dot on the ground, and as long as you're attacking the dot, and that's your Nancy Guthrie story, then they're not coming after the hand. Well, we see the hand and the dot right now. I can see what the dot is. The dot is a silver alert in Arizona. That's local news. And the hand is manipulating and trying to keep us away from what's going on with these files, which are clearly full of way more stuff. I don't know what's in them, and neither do you, and I won't make any sort of indication that I do, but I know how to get in front of it, and how they haven't figured it out with all the brains and all the money and all of the experience they have in media. Maybe it's because they just haven't been around real people long enough. So there's all that. All right, let's do something kind of funny and clever. Here's something I like seeing. Women praising their husbands. This is a normal thing that used to always went down. For some reason, that's not what social media is about. It's one of the things that we hate about today's world. People bitching about their spouses. I like people saying that their spouse is awesome and that they're so happy that they married them. Makes me kind of feel good about stuff. This is a kind of a redeeming moment for everybody, and also kind of funny because a lot of people with those hard skills that don't have $100,000 worth of student loan debts, they're going to be just fine if everything falls apart. Try to be one of those people, I guess.
The unwavering confidence that I have in my husband to have it handled if the world was ending is something that needs to be studied. Like, if the world ended tomorrow, I'm not calling FEMA, I'm calling my husband. Apocalypse hit, sirens going off, meteors falling from the sky, zombies. I'm just standing there like, Jake, he's too calm. He'll be like, all right, here's what we gotta do. A man has a plan for everything. Government collapses, his time to shine. Society crumbles, he's been chomping at the bit for this moment. I swear, if the sky split open and fireballs were raining down on all of us, he would look at it like it was a leaking pipe. He'd be like, yeah, that's not supposed to happen. He'd board up the house and rig 2 solar panels with a flashlight and a Roku remote. He'd somehow trade a Costco pack of batteries for a goat. Meanwhile, I'm spiraling. I can't even handle it if the Wi-Fi goes out. He's outside building a fortress out of patio furniture. Zombies at the door. He's like, they're not getting through that. I use lag bolts. This man would have made Walking Dead his bitch. He watches shows like Alone, Mountain Men, The Last of Us, Walking Dead, like he's preparing for this shit. If the world implodes, I'm not panicking. I'm just grabbing my snacks and standing behind him like, go ahead, honey. This is your time to shine.
That's most men for most of the history of America. My kids and I have been going through the Little House on the Prairie series. Now, a man who was capable of all things at all times for his family, because that's what needed to be done, because it was always a zero-fail issue. Yep, there's a lot of that. There's a lot more of that than people think. So that's and those people don't take the bullshit of we've given you everything. They're like, yeah, I'm not gonna trust you until I can verify it. So maybe that's why we're at where we're at. That's gonna make a comeback. I think it has to. I don't think that woman knows what lag bolts are, by the way. All right. I hope you guys had an interesting time today. Look forward to seeing you again this week. Hopefully we can get our internet working so we can grab clips as needed and we won't be as late during the rest of it. But stick around for the American Radicals podcast if you're watching on Rumble, at AmradPod on YouTube as well. You guys can check out my buddy Steve Friend, see what he's up to today. And I look forward to seeing you for this weird week. We're starting it off on a federal holiday, so that's always a good start. All right. God bless you. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.